afternoon, everyone. Hope you're enjoying your lunch. And it's great to see so many of you in the room today. My name is Christine Leung. I'm from Accenture. I lead our identity innovations practice and our circular supply chain initiative that we launched earlier this year. So, blockchain. We're all here for blockchain. It shows great promise in many, many spaces. But one of the most interesting, at least to me, is what it can do for the social impact space. In the 20+ years in my career, I've definitely seen more explosion around blockchain and the social impact space than any other type of technology. And it's to all of you that I posed a question later on, listening to some of our great panelists that will be coming on today, in terms of how we think this technology might benefit our world, our environment, the people. So today we'll hear from our panelists as they provide an overview of some of the initiatives that they are driving in the blockchain for social impact space, as well as explore what does the future hold for some of this technology. Will it really deliver on the promise to reshape things like identity, supply chain, sustainability, and transactions to allow more people to participate in social, financial inclusion, as well as protect our environment? So we'll explore together and how we can improve the world works today. So please join me in welcoming our panelists, Leandro Nunes from MasterCard, Rick Shreves from Mercy Corps, Jesus Pizarro from Haifa International, Aaron McNevin from WWF, and Chris Jaggers from Learning Machine. So I know that you guys have been polling. Let's have a look at the polls. Wow, this is great. The question was, are you willing to pay a premium for sustainably sourced fair trade goods? We're clearly a great audience here and care about this. 82% of people said yes. And looking at the result, this is fantastic, actually more so than the rest of the world. From some of the statistics that we have, 67% of global consumers are willing to pay more for sustainably sourced fair trade good, and 75% are millennials in that statistic. So with that, some of the interesting things in blockchain, and why is sustainably sourced fair trade goods relevant, right? So you're all doing great work in this space. With headlines like blockchain will end poverty and save the world, there's a lot of buzz about blockchain and its potential to do great things in social impact, environment, identity, financial, social inclusion. Why should we believe it will deliver on its promise? Do you think it will believe that it will deliver on its promise? Where do you think the greatest potential is for this technology? Is it identity? Is it supply chain? Is it sustainability, microfinancing, empowerment of women? So I'll go to you first, Leandro.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you for having us here. So yeah, before we start, let me just tell a little bit of a MasterCard journey here in the blockchain. So we built our blockchain around 5 years ago, and we came up with this top 3 in terms of patents on the blockchain. And then on top of that, we created our provenance solution. And that it comes to your question. So with the provenance solution, we see a variety of cases in the industries and how we can address sustainability. And then sustainability becomes really big now. So how we can come up with a model that incentivizes others to be part of a blockchain, which is a pain point for all blockchains here, how we can scale. So that's what we're trying to do in MasterCard. We're doing, come with a blockchain, getting others capabilities we have in MasterCard, such as digital payments, AI, and bring it to help our ecosystem to scale and establish a governance with them. So to your question, I think as soon as you give an identity to a product and you track this, the sustainability is everybody wants, right? So I wanted to tell a story. I'm a consumer, like you can see here. They wanted to see, they would pay for it, right? So why not address these pain points?
Great. Rick?
Yeah, thanks, Christine. Hello, everybody. My name's Rick Shreves. I'm with Mercy Corps. We're one of the world's largest humanitarian aid and development agencies. We work in 43 countries around the world. And so when I hear people say things like, blockchain is going to solve all the problems, I tend to look at that sort of silver bullet thinking and think, no, it's not. It's going to help. It's going to be a useful tool in our toolkit. But the problem in a lot of the places where we work, and the problem everywhere, frankly, it isn't the technology. The technology is the easy part. The problem is the people, the systems, and the contracts, right? That's what stymies all of us with technology implementations anywhere in the world. And a lot of work that we do is with refugee populations and displaced populations. And in those places where it's extremely difficult to work because of the environmental conditions, that's not going to change. It's still going to require boots on the ground, people with specialist skills, people willing to work in those environments. And so while the technology can help us, it's not the silver bullet. To answer the question, where do we see the most potential? Given the nature of our portfolio, that we work with a lot of disenfranchised populations, we're most excited about the financial inclusion aspects that come with blockchain and with digital payment systems and with digital identity. And in terms of what we think is critically important, well, digital identity is the linchpin that holds all these solutions together, right? We have to have that sorted out and in place to begin with before we can do so many things. It's foundational.
Thank you, Rick. Jesus?
Hello, Christine. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for the invitation, and also thank you very much to Accenture for the invitation. I work for Haifa International. We are celebrating 75 years old. The first project was in my home country, Puerto Rico. I want to make a quick comment about the surveys. Great result. And by the way, for example, in coffee, we have been paying more in the last 20 years, but the farmers are receiving 50% less. Yeah. By the way, every time that you buy a coffee, less than 10% of the revenue go to the farmer. And we believe that blockchain technology can solve this problem, can make the market more efficient, can bring transparency, and can make sure that the product that we buy is an ethical value chain. So in Haifa International, we start with Bitcoin in 2016, and the reason was simple. Bitcoin is financial inclusion, point. And then in 2017, we create the blockchain initiative, and our first project, we helped a grassroots farmer co-op in Arkansas to do the first implementation of poultry supply chain using the Ethereum blockchain with the collaboration with Provenance. Today, you can go to grassroots.com and you can buy poultry, beef, and pork, and you can validate the provenance with the blockchain. This year, we are going to do an implementation in Honduras about coffee supply chain and cocoa supply chain, and also we are trying to make some proof of concept around this ecosystem that we will be working to do also land registration and to try to connect the farmer to the financial system. In Honduras, to give you one example, 60% of the population, they don't have a bank account. So blockchain technology is a great opportunity to close the gap. Also, we are working with donation tracking. We are working with a student group from the University of Arkansas, Dr. Marcy Lacey. She is here. We are working with that to see if we can improve the transparency part of donation. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jesus. Aaron?
Sure. Thanks, Christine. Thanks, everybody. I guess maybe I got into blockchain, not even really into blockchain. I guess it started out with a story about a Burmese person that was tricked into working on a fishing boat in Thailand, and he was traded from fishing boat to fishing boat for over 3 years. and some of his friends, instead of being traded on fishing boats, they were kept in cages in an island off of Indonesia. And why did this happen? It happened because the actual fisheries, the resources, the natural resources that are supposed to be there and replenish themselves for human use were degraded to the point that you couldn't be profitable. You couldn't be profitable. You couldn't pay a decent wage to somebody on a fishing boat. So you had to enslave them. And I think that it's really telling when you look around the room and you look at the food that people are eating and you say, I don't know where that came from. I don't know how it was produced. The other piece, in 2016, the US government repealed a trade law called the Consumptive Demand Clause, and the Consumptive Demand Clause allowed the US to import goods for forced labor if the US couldn't produce those same amount of goods to meet the consumptive demand. So we're in a pretty archaic system, and we're importing in kind of archaic tenets in supply chain management. And so blockchain can help with accountability. And the greatest challenge with accountability is those that have the most risk and those that are hidden so much by disaggregated, fragmented supply chains that are incredibly long. And so that's where I think the blockchain has some of the greatest potential.
Thank you, Aaron. Chris.
Hi, Christine. Hello, everyone. I'm Chris with Learning Machine. We operate in the digital identity space and specifically official records. 2 years ago, we started with MIT to form an open standard for creating, issuing, and verifying official records in a digital format that can be held on your phone. This is any kind of bearer instrument like birth certificates, academic records, professional licensure, because we wanted to start with an open standard for how to do this that wasn't proprietary. And so block certs can do this across any blockchain, primarily public blockchains, but it can be adapted to private blockchains. And then on top of that, we've built commercial software for schools, companies, and governments to issue official records in a digital format. We've been in market globally for the last year and a half, lots of contracts with governments, education ministries specifically. While this is a horizontal technology, we're focused on education specifically to help with global student flows. And this is the kind of thing that everyone wants. Anyone who's tried to open a bank account or move across borders, every sector is still driven by paper. And so we sometimes joke that we're trying to replace paper. That's the big competitor. And when you think of the blockchain as basically a giant global notary that was designed to confirm the ownership of digital assets, what's another kind of important asset besides money? We think your official records. And so that's what we're going for.
Yeah, very true. I know this for sure. I have to, as a consultant, I have to get my background checked about 3 times a week. And filling in the same set of forms is painful. In the same way that filling in the same sorts of forms for export of food, for provenance of food, for transactions are also very painful. And I'm probably known in 6 different systems as 6 different people. So all of those things, same with fish or shrimp or on some of the work that we've done on, coffee, does it really come from that place? And all of that back and forth, do you trust this data? Do you see what I see is something that's hopefully this technology can bring some light to improving efficiency. So my first question, Aaron, to you. A study last year showed humans and big ag livestock account for 96% of mammal biomass. We're putting a lot of strain on our environment. And you and I are both passionate about this space. How are organizations across the public-private sector able to use this technology to help drive a more sustainable food system and benefit all of us? And we're all eating lunch here, so good time.
Yeah, so thanks, Christine. To me, it goes back to accountability, and that there needs to be accountability in food supply chain. Over the course of from 2014 to 2018, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration refused 3.6 million lots of just shrimp, just farm shrimp, and they're inspecting 1% to 2% of imports. So we have a real problem with, I mean, it's the love-hate of food, right? Food uses 38% of all the land. It requires 70% of all the fresh water. It requires 20% of all wild fish caught from the ocean. And it produces about 25 to 35% of the greenhouse gases. But we need it. And so I think that the idea of blockchain technology in supply chains, it's something that, in my space, you're not cool if you haven't heard of blockchain. And if you don't say something, you're not going to get in a meeting with the C-suite folks. So I think that the key here will be to figure out how do we parse out the remaining natural resources that we use, and how do we actually accumulate a body of knowledge that says, hey, for this food, it takes this much land, water, energy, and wild fish. And we need to have some type of budgeting and accounting, and you can't get that without the accountability.
Thank you. Leandro,
Yep.
the World Bank defines the poorest people on Earth as living on less than $1.90 per day. That's not a lot.
No.
78% of that population, so roughly 800 million people, live in rural areas and rely on agriculture. So part of the problem is, if left with a choice between feeding one's family or following sustainable protocols, there's really not a lot of choice. So how can we use blockchain to help realign some of the incentives? And I know you mentioned some of the incentives aspects already, and redirect some of the premium prices that Jesus also mentioned that we pay today to help them to enable greater sustainability so that we are all paying for more sustainable goods?
Excellent question. And yeah, so when we start this, when you see provenance, we start to deal with the provenance and we talk about technology. You give an identity to the product. You can do easily traceability end to end. But then it becomes no longer a technology discussion, right? You start an ecosystem one. So how I do to get to these people, right? Because how they are paid and how they can bring them back to my solution. So that comes a lot in financial inclusion, right? Paying a farmer is not like paying a company here in New York, right? They have different, so that's why as a MasterCard, we just don't go with the blockchain as a per se blockchain. We just get other solutions we have, it's digital payments, that you can say, okay, so how can I do that? If they have digital there, no. Should I work on a prepaid cards? We've been working with the coffee farmers, we are working with cocos and all these other examples. And to say, how can I bring you to my ecosystem? How can I incentivize you to be part of it? And that's the challenge. The challenge with the traceability, I think, many companies here can do it. So how we can create an incentive model that brings this to reality is like other tools that you should use and understand their needs. You understand how you're going to get that. Like you guys are saying, we need to understand how we reach out to this tier in the blockchain, in the supply chain. And that's extremely important.
Thank you. No, I think changing incentives of people are much harder. And I think we'll touch on that in terms of how do we enable and change those incentives. Rick, with this, you work with an interesting population and very remote and very often refugees in large population in rural areas. How do we help them and others on those fringes of society to benefit from this technology change?
Well, we do a fair amount of work with refugee populations. We also tend to work in places like the Sahel or the Turkana regions of northern Kenya, where things are actually very, very primitive. We also tend to come in the wake of natural disaster when infrastructure's been destroyed. In all of those circumstances, obviously, there's significant barriers to technology usage. Certainly we can be looking at solutions that have lightweight footprints. We can be looking at off-chain storage, side-chain solutions, et cetera. But a lot of it always just simply comes down to the ability to function with a wide range of bandwidth environments and largely with mobile devices. I'm working on a project in Uganda right now where the refugee population, South Sudanese refugees, they're in a refugee camp in Uganda over the border. We were trying to figure out how to do electronic vouchers with them so that they could obtain food. Problem was very few people actually had phones. They had lost everything in the flight from South Sudan. But in Uganda right now, it turns out you can pick up a smartphone for about $20. So we're actually issuing the devices so that we can then use them as a modality for delivering the electronic voucher systems. So there are ways around it, and in different places there's a variety of different tools that you use to accomplish this, but it's an ongoing and significant challenge. I encourage those developers out there in the crowd who are socially conscious, who are interested in trying to extend the reach of this, to try to build inclusion, to really build for the hardest places first, right? Because then you can add in the functionality when we get in richer bandwidth environments, richer technology environments. But we need you building for the hardest places, because that's where the most significant challenges are for us.
Thank you. No, agreed. I think building for the most challenging, once you've done the most challenging, it's easier to go the other way, right? We can all have phone chargers, but in different places it's much harder. So Jesus, how do you see the future for this technology benefiting beneficiaries?
I see a great opportunity because in our sector, in non-for-profit sector, this is about trust. And by the way, also business is about trust. People support NGOs like the NGO that we represent because they trust in our reputation and they trust in our expertise. And blockchain is a new level of trust. And also, sometimes people like to receive something in exchange. That is the reason that some NGO they send you a gift. We work with the project with CryptoCare.tech, a very cool project, you can check it out, where when you donate to Haifa in different pockets, you receive a digital asset similar to the CryptoKitty, but you receive a digital asset. We have 3 pockets. And this kind of transparency has 2 purposes. The person receives something, in this case, is a digital asset that represents the donation, but also the intention of the donor. When you donate to this pocket, to this Ether wallet about women empowerment or environmental or sustainable agriculture, we have the moral and legal obligation to use this money for this purpose. So I believe that at the end of the day, money are going to be in something similar to the cryptocurrency, where you can see the flow of the money from the donor to the beneficiary. The challenge today is that the ecosystem is not there, so we in some way we need your support to build the ecosystem. So, yeah.
Thank you. And lastly, Chris, very important. What role does training and education play in getting people at the base of the pyramid to drive towards, the greater good and using this technology?
The role of education and how to educate. What's the most effective way to get people to understand this? I've been asking myself this question for the last 2 years because all I do is go around the world and speak and try to educate prospects and customers. And I've come to, I think, what might be an unpopular conclusion, is that we're talking about understanding a core technology protocol. That's like asking someone, how do you educate around TCP/IP for appreciating the internet? I don't think you do. I think you have to come up with solutions that show people what it does and put it in their hands, because it's too hard to imagine. This is why we have to go to market with small examples that have real business value, that integrate with the systems they already have, so it can tap into existing workflows, and do it in a way that illustrates data interoperability. Because if you come up with a pilot or a small solution that's proprietary, that only works within a vendor silo, then we're ending up with a world that's no better than we are today. But if you can demonstrate how even a small solution provides a shared record of truth, integrates with existing systems, with a solution that's in people's hands, they'll be like, aha, I got it. In fact, the younger generation already assumes we have it. This is an anecdote I like to share, but I see kids applying to college today. These are digital natives. When they're sometimes asked for their official grades, they'll take pictures of their computer screen and text it to the admissions officer. And then they're truly puzzled as to why that's not accepted. They're like, they're my grades. Why should I have to pay money and wait a long time? Why can't I just send it directly? So that's, that's the future we're all working towards. And when they can do that, it will just feel like that's the way it's supposed to work, even without actually understanding the technology underneath.
A great point. I think that design thinking aspect, making sure that it's for the right user, whether it's a farmer, whether it's the fisherman in Indonesia, to the kids in down the road in the school, to understand what are the use cases are critically important. So we talked about some of the sort of challenges, and we touched on whether it's connectivity, whether it's getting a smartphone, whether it's financial inclusion. In terms of the obstacles and challenges that we are facing for adoption of this technology, what are some of the bigger things that you've seen in your experience, and how can they be overcome, if they can be overcome?
Well, I suppose as someone who's in the NGO sector, as you guys are, you probably can echo this as well as I can. The problem really in our sector is that we've been slow to come to the table. That idea of getting our organizations aligned and on board with this and working in a collaborative fashion across the sector so that we can actually benefit from the decentralized collaboration and from the fact that it is a network technology and it really makes sense at scale has been a major struggle. It's great. FinTech was an early mover. Insurance was on board, automotive, shipping, supply chain. But the NGO space has just been slow to the table. So for me, the biggest challenge is really the education and evangelism and getting our people on board with the idea.
Yeah, I agree. But I guess I would also say that I think that a lot of the consultants impede the spread of blockchain. I say that from the I say that working with Christine to help me understand blockchain. But I can't think of, we had done an RFP to say, what does it look like if we look at the beef supply chain in Brazil and the soy supply chain in Brazil, the farm shrimp supply chain in Thailand, and the tuna supply chain in Indonesia? What does that look like if you were to transpose a blockchain system on top of that? And every single consultant that I talked to said, oh, we'll send you the paperwork. We already got the solution. Let's go. And it wasn't that. I didn't want that. I didn't want a solution because I'm not going to go around touting one single blockchain solution, right? And so it took getting Accenture on board for us to really understand this. And the other thing is that most of the people selling food, they don't even know how their own supply chains work. And so it took a very special set of expertise that have a real depth and knowledge in the supply chains, but then the breadth across the different solutions for blockchain to really pull this off. So I think one of the challenges itself is the consultants offering all these single solutions where the piece on interoperability is really the key, because you are no different than the electronic traceability systems that we've had in the past. The difference in blockchain could be the interoperability, which would change things fundamentally, I think.
Thank you. So that was it was an incredible project, incredible collaboration. Actually, as I said, one of the most, one that I've learned most in my career. So thank you. So what are some of the new opportunities have you discovered since you've been working in this technology?
I can take that. Sure. So yeah, I think as soon as we start to get in this end-to-end traceability, that was just, you're probably going to agree with me, it was just the tip of the iceberg, right? And then comes the client saying, okay, now I have that. What else how can you address it? What the use case? It comes we call the sub-use case of the big one. And we start discussing, come the key stakeholders to this. And it comes to the discussion of how can we include them into this part of the whole solution. How can you get incentivized to be that? It's so easy to do this with big companies, right? It's a completely different story with the small ones. But at the end of the day, you can show, which is more important, is in a fragmented and complex supply chains we now have nowadays, is how can you give visibility, transparency, and at the same time get them on board, right? And that is what becomes the challenges we have now. And I think solutions or ideas like we have the circular supply chain that we bring this, you send the money back to the ones that really wants to, there's no way to be incentivized, right? It's a great opportunity to, to come to this, bring up this discussion more often. I think this is the main challenge we have nowadays. And the most exciting thing.
It is. I think as everyone is all eating here, think about the ingredients that go into your plate. Think about where your bottles come from, where the plastics come from, where is it going to go afterwards? And thinking of all of those is a chain. And how do you know it really goes back to recycling? How do you know that, recently after launching circular supply chain, we had a client that talked about car tires. I learned an enormous amount about how car tires can be recycled and how can you change the incentives in order to enable people to go and recycle it, to build new technologies. And those are not blockchain, but it's all the other digital transformation and all the other technologies that can help to change. And there are lots of technologies in the room here today. So, any other opportunities for any of you that you think since you have discovered, since coming to play with this technology?
Yeah, so one opportunity that we discovered during our blockchain and financial inclusion is land registration. Land is, it's important because normally it's the bigger asset that we have, that everybody has. But what happened in low development economy that 75% of the total land are not registered. So the economist Hernandez Soto, he estimates that this is $9 trillion that are debt that you cannot monetize because you don't have any registration. So we discovered, we see this as an opportunity in Haifa also to see if we can collaborate with other players to make this happen.
Great. What advice? So there's lots of technologies in the room. This is the biggest blockchain conference there is. What advice would you give to individuals with blockchain skills that want to get involved in this space? And I'll take it in reverse order. I'll go with Chris first.
Well, they're not hurting for opportunities if they are technical and interested in this space. So I don't think that's the problem in the US at least. Internationally, we've seen a lot of countries who have the highest appetite for decentralized services. Their populations are very interested in becoming more involved, and their schools may not be prepared. So I think the way I think about the question is, as we go around the globe educating and providing these services, how can we put energy into making part of our offerings and programs or outreach or offering ways that people in all over the world where their school systems don't include this kind of training, how can we hire them in certain capacities and train them? How can we donate our time to speak and be involved in their schools? How can we bring people into those regions and help advise on how to build those programs? Because there's an endless appetite for people with these skills. And there's a lot of interest globally for people that want to get in, but there's a gap, and we're in a good position to help bridge that gap.
Aaron?
I guess for me, I'd ask people to, how are you going to up your game compared to how things have been done in the past, and that things don't need to just accelerate. The rate of acceleration needs to increase too. And I think what we're really finding out is that supply chain management needs to get into a pre-competitive space. You can't ask somebody for, hey, I want this product and I want it traceable, and you talk to one supplier. Oh, because they'll say, oh, it's going to cost too much, I'll just sell to the next guy. It has to be more homogeneous across different supply chains, and I think that what that means to the developers is that you're going to have to offer something that's a bit less traditional than what it has been. And at the end of the day, I think that, at least on the social impact side, for good, I'd rather do something for free and see a massive impact than try to stay inside myself and make all the money I can.
Jesus?
Yeah. I would say education and also you vote with your money, right? So support product and service and organizations that have ethical value chains. Support organizations like us that we are trying to build this ecosystem. So in the market, when you go to the grocery, they are good products that, they are fair trade, they are rainforest, that they are ethical value chain. This is what we can do as an individual, but also education, I would say, that is the best tool.
Well said. Yeah.
Christine, thanks for asking this question, because I always like to have this discussion when I'm in front of a group of people like this. A lot of people really don't seem to be aware that jobs like mine exist in this sector. I'm the director of emerging technologies in an aid and development firm. I don't simply work with blockchain. I work with 3D printing. I work with virtual reality technologies. I work with remote sensing. I work with drones. I work with satellite imagery. Those sort of jobs exist in this space. So if you're sitting out there today and you're interested in doing something for social good and not just simply making your investors or your bosses rich, come talk to us. Talk to companies like ours. We'd love to have you. It's so hard for us to find talent in emerging technologies because there's so much competition from the private sector. But believe me, you're welcome. We'd love to talk to you.
Yeah, and for us, it would be very hard for us to do what we're doing without the expertise here. So I think we need to partner with everybody here to get us thinking of a solution, to get us thinking of what we can partner, what we can do this together. We wouldn't be the same without them, because they have the expertise, they know the industry, they know their market, they know how to do it, right? We try to do it by ourselves in silos. Basically, we're just talking about small pilots that don't go anywhere. So what we do, this being really meaningful, is when you can bring this together and then as a company support this cause, right? It's not only seen as a business, from a business perspective, but also what we can do to support it. And bringing the technology to this is a very good way to do it.
Excellent. And I know we have 6 minutes left, so my last question to each one of you before we close up. So in an ideal world, I know blockchain is about trust, it's about collaboration, as we all are here. And if you could deploy blockchain without any constraints, no budgetary constraints, bureaucracy, technical infrastructure, what would we try and achieve? So let's start with Leandro and go all the way down.
I think we're trying to achieve a better ecosystem, right? Something that works from really end to end and not only be a part of a slide, right? Saying it helps the very, tip of the supply chain, the farmers, having this financial inclusion, and it also comes all the way through until you get the consumers, right? I'm like a consumer. I want to see where my product comes from. I want to see I want to check the journey of this product, and we get the visibility now. So I think it goes for this, how we can improve this ecosystem in a way that it benefits everybody.
In a perfect world, let's see, where to begin. We hear a lot of times about people saying, oh, there's a huge unbanked population out there. We need to get them banked. I've got a different idea. Let's unbank the banked. Let's level the field for financial inclusion. Let's level the field for access to financial services. Let's liberate the locked up capital in land titles that they can't prove right to those titles. Let's close that gap in the wealth disparity that's growing all over the world right now. That, to me, in a perfect world, would be the big win for this tech.
Yeah. So in Haifa International, the vision that we have for the blockchain initiative is to create a blockchain network where we can, for sustainable agricultural development, agricultural that is calling the planet, to provide technical assistance, access to capital, I'm sorry, forget the technical assistance, access to capital, and financial inclusion. So this is our vision.
I guess I would say that the biggest thing that could come from blockchain in a perfect world after we've solved all your problems. But for me, it's radical transparency. I think that's got to be the next stage. We can't have supply chains cloaked. We can't have people putting food in their kids' mouths that you don't even know where it came from. I mean, you're putting stuff in your kids' mouths that, you know, prescriptions are filled out for certain things. And the pharmaceutical companies track these products, probably a blockchain. But I mean, I think that it's no longer okay to have things under lock and key when it comes to human values. I think radical transparency is probably the best thing that could come out with it.
And Chris.
You know, the heritage of blockchain is to address the power imbalance between big institutions and individuals. And so empowering individuals is what we're all trying to do, and I think that is already underway. Perhaps we would all like to see it go faster. But you know, the web was made without an identity layer. And so, you know, a lot of the work in the identity space is trying to get people to be able to represent themselves and the things they own more seamlessly across jurisdictions and more conveniently, ultimately. And so, yeah, I want a world where I can move countries, represent myself in different ways, all with software, without having to generate paper, and have it, you know, be simple.
Thank you.
What about you, Christine?
What about me?
Yeah.
Great question. I would actually help to change incentives and hope to change the planet. Save some rhinos, orangutans, save the animals, save the environment. And I think that, for me, is a huge passion, and you know, what we do to the oceans, to the planet. And if we can help to change the people and their incentives by better financial inclusion, better education, getting the funds to the right people, where there's donation, where there is fair trade, where's the sustainability. And then therefore, if we can change incentives, we can change the world.
Good one.
Thank you. So with that, we've heard from our panelists today. Thank you. Chris, Aaron, Jesus, Rick, and Leandro, thank you for all of your insights and from the different aspects of the blockchain world, as well as the non-blockchain world, from education and training to credentialing to food systems to some of our NGO partners here who sees the rural population, the refugee population, as well as you guys all heard, jobs in NGOs in emerging technology definitely exist, and they would love to hear from you, as well as our partners here at MasterCard, and thinking through what provenance can mean and what financial inclusion can mean. So thank you very much, everybody, and really thank you for participating in our panel.